The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood quietly in her private chambers. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the last of the personal items that would accompany her on this most difficult journey. Today would mark the end of an era, though the world outside remained unaware of the profound farewell that was about to unfold. Prince William entered the room without his usual confident stride. His shoulders carried the weight of duty and personal loss in equal measure. The couple had learned 3 days earlier that their beloved family friend and longtime mentor, Lord Pemberton, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. This man had been more than just a royal advisor. He had been the grandfather figure both William and Catherine had needed during their early years of marriage. Catherine looked up at her husband. Seeing the same mixture of grief and determination she felt within herself, they had attended many formal state occasions together, but this farewell would be different. This would be personal, intimate, and completely away from the public eye that usually followed their every move. "The car is ready," William said softly, his voice carrying a tenderness reserved only for these private moments between them. Catherine nodded, picking up the small bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered from their private garden that morning. Lord Pemberton had always preferred simple, natural beauty over elaborate royal arrangements. As they walked through the corridors of Windsor Castle, their footsteps echoed against the ancient stone walls. Staff members they passed offered respectful nods, understanding the solemnity of the occasion. Catherine's black dress was simple yet elegant, while William wore a dark navy suit rather than his formal military uniform. Today was not about royal protocol. It was about saying goodbye to someone who had touched their hearts deeply. The journey to Lord Pemberton's countryside estate took them through rolling English hills dotted with sheep and ancient oak trees. Neither spoke much during the drive, but their hands remained intertwined, drawing strength from each other's presence. Catherine occasionally squeezed William's hand when she noticed his jaw tighten with suppressed emotion. When they arrived at the modest country house, they were greeted not by crowds or media, but by Lord Pemberton's small family circle. His daughter Margaret embraced Catherine warmly, tears streaming down both women's faces. Lord Pemberton's grandchildren, now adults themselves, stood quietly nearby, now remembering how the prince and princess had often joined their grandfather for informal Sunday dinners. The house itself told the story of a life well lived. Photographs covered every available surface, showing Lord Pemberton through the decades, including many candid shots with the royal family. Catherine paused before one particular image that showed her and William during their engagement period, laughing at something Lord Pemberton was saying. His eyes twinkled with mischief in the photograph. It's the same expression she remembered from countless conversations. William stood beside a bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes, running his fingers along the spines. Many of these books contained the wisdom Lord Pemberton had shared with him during difficult periods of royal duty. The old man had taught him that true leadership came not from commanding others, but from understanding their struggles and serving with humility. As the afternoon light began to fade, the small gathering moved to the garden, where Lord Pemberton had spent his final years tending to his roses. Catherine knelt beside his favorite bench and placed her wildflower bouquet on the seat where he used to sit each evening, watching the sunset. The simple gesture spoke volumes about the genuine affection she held for this remarkable man who had helped shape her understanding of royal responsibility. Margaret approached the couple as they stood together in the garden's quiet beauty. She handed William a small wrapped package, explaining that her father had specifically requested it be given to them after his passing. With careful hands, William unwrapped the gift to reveal a worn leather journal filled with Lord Pemberton's handwritten notes about leadership, love, and service to others. The inscription on the first page read, "For William and Catherine, who prove every day that true nobility comes from the heart, not the crown." Catherine's breath caught in her throat as William read the words aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. As evening approached, the couple knew their private time was drawing to a close. They had shared stories, tears, and laughter with Lord Pemberton's family, creating a perfect tribute to a man who had valued authentic human connection above all else. The warmth of these relationships had sustained him throughout his life, and now that same warmth provided comfort to those he left behind. The small chapel where the private service would be held had been Lord Pemberton's place of worship for over 40 years. Unlike the grand cathedrals where royal ceremonies typically took place, this humble stone building seated barely 50 people. Its stained glass windows cast gentle rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews, creating an atmosphere of peaceful reverence. Catherine and William arrived early, wanting to spend quiet moments in reflection before the other mourners. Gathered, they sat in the second row, deliberately choosing not to take the front seats that protocol might have suggested. Lord Pemberton would have appreciated this gesture of humility, always believing that grief should unite people rather than divide them by rank or status. The princess closed her eyes and remembered their last conversation with Lord Pemberton just 2 months earlier. He had been sitting in his favorite armchair by the fireplace, his one strong hands now frail, but his mind still sharp as ever. He had spoken about the importance of finding joy in small moments, of cherishing the ordinary days that make up a life well lived. "Promise me something," he had said to them both that evening, his voice still carrying the authority that had once commanded royal meetings. "Never let duty overshadow your humanity. The crown serves the people, not the other way around." William had nodded solemnly, understanding that these words carried the weight of decades of faithful service as the chapel began to fill with mourners. Catherine noticed how diverse the gathering was. Farmers from the local village sat beside former government officials, while retired palace staff shared pews with Lord Pemberton's university friends. This mix of people reflected the man's remarkable ability to connect with everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. The service began with a simple hymn that Lord Pemberton had specifically requested. His voice had often been heard singing these same words during the many informal gatherings at his home. William's baritone voice joined the others, though emotion occasionally caused his singing to falter. Catherine's hand found his arm, providing silent support as they honored their friend's memory together. Margaret stepped forward to deliver the main eulogy, her composure impressive despite the obvious grief etched on her face. She spoke about her father's philosophy of service, how he believed that true privilege came with the responsibility to lift others up. Her words painted a picture of a man who had dedicated his life to helping others find their own strength and purpose. "My father often said that the measure of a person's worth was not in what they achieved for themselves, but in what they inspired others to become." Margaret continued, her eyes briefly meeting William and Catherine's. He was particularly proud of the young leaders he had the privilege to mentor, watching them grow into roles of service and compassion. Catherine felt tears slip down her cheeks as she listened to stories about Lord Pemberton's quiet acts of kindness. The time he had driven through a snowstorm to deliver medicine to an elderly neighbor. His anonymous donations to the local food bank that had continued for over 20 years. The scholarship fund he had established for underprivileged students, never seeking recognition or praise for his generosity. When Margaret finished speaking, she invited others to share their memories. One by one, people stood to tell stories that revealed different facets of Lord Pemberton's character. A young mother spoke about how he had helped her find employment after her husband's death. A former student described how his encouragement had led to a successful career in social work. William knew he wanted to say something, but royal protocol typically discouraged such personal displays at public gatherings. However, this was not a public gathering in the traditional sense, and Lord Pemberton had always encouraged him to speak from the heart rather than from prepared remarks. Rising from his seat, William moved to the front of the chapel with quiet dignity. "Lord Pemberton taught me that leadership is not about being in charge, but about taking care of those in your charge," William began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "He showed Catherine and me that service to others is not a burden to be carried, but a privilege to be embraced. His wisdom guided us through our early years of marriage and public duty, always with patience and understanding." Catherine watched her husband with admiration as he continued speaking, noting how his words reflected the genuine respect and affection he held for their departed friend. William spoke about the countless hours Lord Pemberton had spent listening to their concerns, offering guidance without judgment, and helping them navigate the unique challenges of royal life while maintaining their personal values. "He never asked us to be perfect," William concluded, his voice growing softer. "He simply asked us to be genuine, to lead with compassion, and to remember that behind every title and every role, we are all simply human beings trying to make a positive difference in the world." The chapel fell into respectful silence as William returned to his seat beside Catherine. She squeezed his hand, proud of his courage in sharing such personal thoughts with the gathered mourners. Around them, she could see heads nodding in agreement, faces reflecting their own memories of Lord Pemberton's gentle wisdom and unwavering support. As the service drew to a close, the congregation joined together in singing Amazing Grace, Lord Pemberton's favorite hymn. The voices rose in harmony, creating a sound that seemed to fill every corner of the small chapel with warmth and hope. Catherine and William sang alongside the others, their voices blending with the community of people who had been touched by one remarkable man's life of service. Following the chapel service, the mourners walked together along a winding path through Lord Pemberton's beloved woodland. This procession moved slowly, allowing time for quiet reflection and informal conversations between people who might never have met under other circumstances. Catherine and William walked hand in hand, occasionally stopping to speak with other mourners who wanted to share their own memories of Lord Pemberton's kindness. The woodland path led to a small clearing where Lord Pemberton had often spent his mornings reading and writing in his journal. A magnificent oak tree stood at the center of the clearing, its branches spreading wide to create natural shelter. This was where his ashes would be scattered, according to his final wishes. The tree had been planted 50 years earlier by Lord Pemberton and his late wife to commemorate their wedding anniversary. Margaret carried the simple wooden urn, walking with quiet dignity as the group gathered in a circle around the oak tree. Catherine noticed how the afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating dancing patterns on the forest floor. The setting felt perfect for honoring a man who had always preferred nature's simple beauty over elaborate ceremonies. Before the scattering began, Margaret invited everyone to share one final memory or thought about her father. The circle of mourners took turns speaking, each person adding another piece to the mosaic of Lord Pemberton's remarkable life. Catherine found herself thinking about the countless small moments that had shaped her relationship with this extraordinary man. She remembered the evening when she had been struggling with criticism from the media about her royal duties. Lord Pemberton had invited her for tea in his garden, listening patiently as she expressed her frustrations and doubts. Rather than offering empty reassurances, he had shared stories about other members of the royal family who had faced similar challenges, helping her understand that these struggles were part of a larger journey of service. "Your turn, my dear," Margaret said gently, nodding toward Catherine with an encouraging smile. The princess had not planned to speak publicly, but something about the intimate setting and the warmth of the gathering gave her courage to share her thoughts. Catherine stepped slightly forward, her voice clear but soft as she began to speak. Lord Pemberton had a gift for seeing potential in others, even when they couldn't see it themselves. He taught me that being royal was not about being perfect, but about being genuine in your desire to serve others. His patience and wisdom helped shape not just my understanding of duty, but my understanding of myself. She paused, looking around at the faces in the circle, seeing her own emotions reflected in their expressions. He once told me that the most important conversations happen not in grand meeting rooms, but around kitchen tables and on garden benches. He lived that philosophy every day, making everyone he met feel valued and heard. William watched his wife with deep admiration, recognizing the courage it took for her to speak so personally in front of others. When Catherine finished speaking, he felt compelled to add his own thoughts about the man who had become like a grandfather to them both. Lord Pemberton understood that true strength comes from vulnerability, William said, his voice carrying across the clearing. He taught us that admitting our struggles and asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of wisdom. Created a safe space where we could be honest about our fears and uncertainties, knowing that his guidance would help us find our way forward. As the sharing continued around the circle, stories emerged that painted a picture of Lord Pemberton's extraordinary impact on diverse lives. A young teacher spoke about how his mentorship had given her confidence to work with troubled students. A retired groundskeeper described how Lord Pemberton had treated him as an equal, always asking about his family and remembering important details from previous conversations. One of Lord Pemberton's university colleagues shared a story about his research work, explaining how his studies on community development had influenced social policies that helped thousands of families. Catherine was struck by how many different ways this one man had touched the world, often without seeking any recognition for his contributions. When everyone had spoken, Margaret opened the wooden urn and began the gentle process of scattering her father's ashes around the base of the oak tree. The mourners watched in respectful silence as part of Lord Pemberton became one with the natural setting he had loved so deeply. Catherine felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that their friend would remain connected to this beautiful place forever. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves above them, creating a soft rustling sound that seemed to whisper through the clearing. Several mourners looked up, smiling at what felt like Lord Pemberton's gentle presence acknowledging their farewell. Catherine felt William's arms slip around her shoulders as they stood together, drawing comfort from each other's presence and from the knowledge that their friend's influence would continue to guide them as the scattering concluded. To place small mementos around the base of the oak tree. Catherine had brought a smooth stone from the beach where she and William had honeymooned, remembering how Lord Pemberton had given them advice about maintaining their connection to each other. Despite the demands of public life, William placed a fountain pen beside the stone, the same type of pen Lord Pemberton used to write his countless letters of encouragement and wisdom. The informal memorial grew as others added their own tokens of remembrance, fresh flowers, meaningful books, and small personal items created a touching display around the tree trunk. Margaret smiled through her tears, seeing how her father's memory was being honored by this diverse group of people whose lives he had enriched. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the mourners gradually prepared to leave the clearing. However, nobody seemed eager to rush away from this peaceful place where they had shared such meaningful moments together. The afternoon had created bonds between strangers, united by their shared appreciation for Lord Pemberton's remarkable life and legacy. Back at Lord Pemberton's house, the mourners gathered for an informal reception that felt more like a family reunion than a formal wake. Margaret had prepared simple refreshments following her father's preference for comfortable hospitality, over elaborate, entertaining. The living room filled with gentle conversation as people continued sharing stories and finding connections with others who had known Lord Pemberton in different contexts. Catherine found herself drawn to a corner of the room where photographs chronicled Lord Pemberton's long life. She studied images from his childhood, his university years, his early career in public service, and his later years as a trusted royal advisor. Each photograph told part of the story of a man who had lived with purpose and integrity, building relationships that lasted decades. One photograph particularly caught her attention, showing Lord Pemberton with a group of young people during what appeared to be a community service project. His sleeves were rolled up, and he was working alongside teenagers to plant trees in an urban area. Despite being in his 60s at the time, he looked completely engaged and energetic, clearly enjoying the physical work and the company of the young volunteers. That was taken during the Inner City Renewal Project he organized 15 years ago, Margaret explained, appearing beside Catherine with 2 cups of tea. Father believed that bringing different generations together was essential for building strong communities. He spent every Saturday for 2 years working with those young people, and many of them still write to me regularly. William joined them, having just finished a conversation with one of Lord Pemberton's former colleagues about conservation efforts. The man had explained how Lord Pemberton's passion for environmental protection had influenced several important policy decisions, always working quietly behind the scenes rather than seeking public recognition for his contributions. Did touch so many lives, William observed, looking around the room at the diverse gathering of people. I'm discovering aspects of his work that I never knew about, even after all these years of friendship. Catherine nodded, sipping her tea thoughtfully. He had this remarkable ability to compartmentalize his various roles, while still bringing the same values to everything he did. Whether he was advising us, mentoring young people, or working on environmental projects, he always approached every situation with the same combination of wisdom and humility. Margaret smiled, clearly pleased to see how deeply William and Catherine appreciated her father's character. "He often spoke about you both, you know? He was so proud of the way you handled the transition into public life, especially during those challenging early years," he said. "You demonstrated exactly the kind of authentic leadership he hoped to see in your generation." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lord Pemberton's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, who had driven down from Scotland to attend the service. Despite being in her 80s, she moved with determination and purpose immediately, beginning to help with serving refreshments and making sure everyone felt welcome. Catherine remembered Mrs. Patterson from previous visits, recalling her dry sense of humor and her protective attitude toward Lord Pemberton. The elderly woman had worked for the family for over 30 years, becoming more like a family member than an employee. Lord Pemberton had often joked that Mrs. Patterson was the real authority in his household, and everyone who knew them agreed. "Your Highness," Mrs. Patterson said, approaching Catherine with a small wrapped package. "His lordship asked me to give this to you specifically. He said you would understand its significance when the time was right." Catherine accepted the package with curious gratitude, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a small silver locket that she recognized immediately. Lord Pemberton's late wife had worn this locket in many of the photographs displayed around the house. Opening it revealed 2 tiny photographs, one of Lord Pemberton and his wife on their wedding day, and another of Catherine and William during their engagement announcement. "He said you reminded him of Lady Pemberton," Mrs. Patterson explained, her voice growing softer. "Not in appearance, but in spirit. He said you both had the same combination of strength and gentleness, the same ability to see the best in people, even during difficult times." William looked over Catherine's shoulder at the locket, understanding immediately why Lord Pemberton had chosen this particular gift. The comparison to Lady Pemberton was perhaps the highest compliment he could have given Catherine. As their friend had spoken often about his wife's remarkable character and her positive influence on his own life and work, as the afternoon progressed, Catherine and William found themselves naturally gravitating toward different groups of mourners. Learning about various aspects of Lord Pemberton's life and work, Catherine spoke with several of the young people he had mentored, hearing stories about how his guidance had helped them overcome personal challenges and find direction in their lives. One young woman, now a successful social worker, described how Lord Pemberton had supported her through university, despite having no family obligation to do so. He had believed in her potential when she struggled to believe in herself, providing both financial assistance and emotional encouragement throughout her studies. William spent time with Lord Pemberton's environmental colleagues, learning about conservation projects that had been funded through his quiet philanthropy. These men and women spoke passionately about his commitment to protecting natural habitats, explaining how his influence had helped preserve thousands of acres of countryside for future generations. The reception continued into the early evening, with no one seeming eager to end this opportunity to celebrate Lord Pemberton's life and legacy. Catherine noticed how naturally the conversations flowed, with people from vastly different backgrounds finding common ground in their shared appreciation for their departed friend. As the gathering finally began to wind down, Margaret approached William and Catherine with a request that surprised them both. She wondered if they would consider continuing her father's tradition of hosting informal mentoring sessions for young people interested in public service. Lord Pemberton had conducted these sessions monthly, providing guidance and encouragement to emerging leaders in various fields. Catherine and William exchanged glances, immediately understanding the significance of this request. Taking on this responsibility would be a meaningful way to honor their friend's memory, while continuing his important work of developing future leaders. They agreed without hesitation, recognizing this as an opportunity to give back some of the wisdom and support they had received from Lord Pemberton over the years. As evening approached, Catherine and William prepared to make their final farewells before returning to Windsor. The day had been emotionally exhausting, yet deeply meaningful, providing them with a sense of closure while also inspiring them to carry forward Lord Pemberton's legacy of service and compassion. Margaret walked them to their car, carrying a box of Lord Pemberton's personal papers that he had specifically requested be given to them. These documents included letters he had written but never sent, reflecting his thoughts on leadership, service, and the evolution of the monarchy over the decades. He had hoped these private reflections might prove useful to them in their future roles. "There's something else," Margaret said quietly, glancing around to ensure their privacy. "Father asked me to tell you about a project he had been working on quietly for the past 2 years. He was concerned about the growing disconnect between young people and traditional institutions, including the monarchy." Catherine and William listened intently as Margaret explained her father's vision for a series of community centers that would provide mentoring, education, and support services to young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. He had already secured funding and identified potential locations, but had wanted to discuss the project with them before moving forward publicly. "He hoped you might consider becoming patrons of the initiative," Margaret continued. "He felt that your involvement would help bridge the gap between the royal family and communities that often feel overlooked by traditional institutions. The centers would operate on the principles he lived by, treating everyone with dignity, providing practical support, and helping people discover their own potential." William felt a surge of excitement at this opportunity to honor their friends' memory while addressing important social needs. The project represented everything Lord Pemberton had stood for: practical service, genuine care for others, and the belief that everyone deserved the chance to succeed, regardless of their circumstances. Catherine, equally enthusiastic, recognizing how this initiative could complement their existing charitable work while extending their impact into communities they hadn't reached effectively before. Lord Pemberton's research and planning had clearly identified specific needs and developed thoughtful solutions, providing them with a solid foundation for meaningful action. "We would be honored to support this project," William said without hesitation. "It represents everything your father taught us about the importance of listening to people, understanding their real needs, and working alongside communities rather than simply working for them." As they discussed the practical details of the community center project, Catherine reflected on how typical this was of Lord Pemberton's approach to problems. Rather than simply identifying issues and talking about solutions, he had invested time and resources in developing concrete plans for positive change. Even in death, he was still teaching them about the importance of turning compassion into action. Margaret handed William a key to one of the proposed community center locations, explaining that her father had already purchased the building and begun initial renovations. He had wanted everything ready so that the project could move forward quickly once they agreed to participate. This foresight and preparation demonstrated the same careful planning that had characterized all of his endeavors. The drive back to Windsor was quiet. Both Catherine and William processing the day's experiences and thinking about the commitments they had just made. The car's interior felt different somehow, filled with the weight of new responsibilities, but also with the warmth of continuing connection to their beloved mentor. Catherine held the silver locket Mrs. Patterson had given her, occasionally opening it to look at the photographs inside. The comparison to Lady Pemberton felt both honoring and challenging. It's inspiring her to live up to the example of a woman she had never met but clearly shared important qualities with, according to someone who knew them both well. William drove carefully through the darkening countryside, thinking about the journal Lord Pemberton had left for them and wondering what insights those private pages might contain. He looked forward to reading through the reflections and observations their friend had recorded, knowing that these thoughts would continue to guide their decision-making for years to come as they passed through small villages along their route. Catherine noticed lights beginning to appear in windows, families gathering for evening meals and quiet time together. These scenes reminded her of Lord Pemberton's emphasis on the importance of ordinary moments and everyday connections between people. He would have loved seeing all those different people come together today, Catherine observed, watching William nod in agreement. The farmers and the government officials, the students and the retirees, all united by their respect and affection for one remarkable man. William smiled, remembering how naturally Lord Pemberton had moved between different social circles, always adapting his communication style while maintaining his fundamental authenticity. This ability to connect with people from all backgrounds had been one of his greatest gifts, enabling him to build bridges between communities that might otherwise never interact. The Community Center project will give us the chance to create Those kinds of connections, William replied thoughtfully. Places where people can come together regardless of their circumstances, just like today's gathering, but on an ongoing basis. As Windsor Castle came into view, both Catherine and William felt the familiar mixture of comfort and responsibility that came with returning home. The castle's ancient stones had witnessed centuries of royal farewells, but few could have been more meaningful than the intimate goodbye they had shared with Lord Pemberton and his extended family of friends and colleagues. They drove through the castle gates, knowing that their lives had been changed by the day's experiences. Not just by saying farewell to someone they loved, but by accepting new responsibilities that would honor his memory through continued service to others. The silent car ride had given them time to absorb these changes and begin thinking about how to translate their emotions into effective action. That evening, Catherine and William sat together in their private sitting room at Windsor Castle, surrounded by the items Margaret had given them from Lord Pemberton's estate. The leather journal lay open between them as they took turns reading passages aloud, discovering new layers of their mentor's wisdom and philosophy. One particular entry, dated just 3 months before his death, captured their attention immediately. Lord Pemberton had written about observing them during a charity event, noting how they had taken time to speak personally with every volunteer despite a packed schedule. He described feeling proud of their growth as leaders who understood that genuine service required authentic human connection. They have learned that the crown is not a symbol of power over others, but a commitment to serve others. The entry continued, "Our children will grow up understanding that privilege brings responsibility, and that true nobility is measured by how we treat those who can do nothing for us in return." Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes as she read these words, recognizing the profound trust Lord Pemberton had placed in their family's future. His confidence in their ability to raise their children with proper values felt both affirming and challenging. Inspiring her to be worthy of such faith, William turned to another section of the journal where Lord Pemberton had outlined his thoughts about the monarchy's role in modern society. He had written extensively about the need for royal institutions to evolve while maintaining their essential character, adapting to changing social needs without losing sight of timeless principles. The monarchy's greatest strength lies not in tradition for its own sake, but in its ability to provide stability and continuity while encouraging positive change. One passage read, "William and Catherine represent this balance beautifully, respecting the past while embracing the future with open hearts and minds." As they continued reading, they discovered detailed observations about their individual strengths and areas for growth. Lord Pemberton had noted William's natural leadership abilities and his genuine care for environmental issues, while praising Catherine's gift for connecting with people and her intuitive understanding of others' emotional needs. The journal also contained practical advice about navigating the challenges of royal life, while maintaining their marriage and family relationships. Lord Pemberton had written about the importance of protecting private time together, creating space for honest communication about their struggles and concerns. "Remember that you are partners first, royals second," one entry advised. "Your relationship with each other provides the foundation for everything else you do. Protect that connection, nurture it, and let it strengthen you for the service you provide to others." Catherine closed the journal carefully, feeling overwhelmed by the depth of thought and care their friend had invested in their success and happiness. These weren't casual observations, but carefully considered insights. Based on decades of experience and genuine affection for their family, William picked up the architectural plans for the community center project, studying the thoughtful design that incorporated spaces for education, counseling, recreational activities, and community meetings. Lord Pemberton had envisioned these centers as hubs where people could access support services while also contributing their own skills and knowledge to help others. "Look at this," William said, pointing to notes written in Lord Pemberton's careful handwriting along the margins of the plans. He's identified specific programs for different age groups, partnerships with local businesses for job training, and even plans for mobile outreach services to reach people who can't come to the centers. Catherine leaned over to study the detailed planning, once again amazed by their friend's thorough approach to solving problems. Every aspect of the project reflected his deep understanding of community needs and his commitment to creating sustainable solutions rather than temporary fixes. A soft knock on the door interrupted their planning session. Catherine's private secretary entered with a message that had arrived from Margaret, along with several letters that had been delivered to Lord Pemberton's estate following news of his death. These letters came from people around the world who had been touched by his work and wanted to express their condolences. Reading through these messages, Catherine and William began to understand the truly international scope of Lord Pemberton's influence. Letters came from former students, now working in developing countries, government officials who had implemented policies based on his research, and ordinary citizens whose lives had been changed by programs he had helped establish. One letter particularly moved them both, written by a young mother in Canada whose family had been supported through a difficult period by one of Lord Pemberton's scholarship programs. She described how his investment in her education had enabled her to build a career that now allowed her to support other families facing similar challenges. He created ripple effects of positive change that are still spreading outward, Catherine observed, carefully folding the letter back into its envelope. Every person he helped went on to help others, multiplying his impact far beyond what any individual could accomplish alone. William nodded, understanding that this multiplication of positive influence represented the true measure of a life well lived. Lord Pemberton's legacy would continue growing through the actions of everyone he had touched, creating an expanding network of people committed to serving others. As the evening grew late, Catherine and William made decisions about their immediate next steps for honoring Lord Pemberton's memory. They would begin visiting the proposed community center sites within the following weeks, meeting with local leaders to understand specific community needs and refine the project plans accordingly. They also agreed to begin hosting the monthly mentoring sessions Margaret had requested, starting with a small group of young people who had been part of Lord Pemberton's existing programs. These sessions would help them develop their own mentoring skills while ensuring continuity for the participants who had been counting on continued guidance. Before going to bed, they stood together at their window overlooking the castle grounds, thinking about the day's experiences and feeling grateful for the privilege of having known such a remarkable man. The stars were particularly bright that night, and Catherine smiled, remembering how Lord Pemberton had often said that the best way to honor someone's memory was to let their positive influence shine through your own actions. He's still teaching us, William said quietly, his arm around Catherine's shoulders as they looked out at the peaceful night. Every decision we make from now on will be influenced by his example, his wisdom, and his belief in our ability to make a positive difference. Catherine nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the strength that came from knowing they were carrying forward the work of someone who had dedicated his life to serving others. Their silent farewell had indeed spoken volumes, not just about their grief, but about their commitment to ensuring that Lord Pemberton's legacy of service, compassion, and authentic leadership would continue inspiring positive change for generations to come.